How's it going? My name is Sarah, and I am presenting my ritual observation research project. I did mine on Shepherd's Chapel. Let's see here if I can't bring this up here. There we go. So, yeah, Shepherd's Chapel. I didn't sit in because they're in church services in Arkansas, so I had to do virtually on a live feed. So Shepherd's Chapel church service is a Christian led um, service by Pastor Dennis Murray. The church service is Monday through Sunday online, 24 hours a day virtually, or in church service is Wednesdays, 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. in Gravette, Arkansas. Pastor Dennis Murray is a pastor, received his education as an undergraduate from McMaster University and received a Master of Divinity from Tyndale Seminary and was ordained in 1985. He and his father and his brother at the time all led the church service, but since then, 2014, his father passed away, and his brother actually passed away not long following that. So the service has been passed on to Dennis. The ritual. So, what is taught? Pastor Dennis Murray discussed what they call the serpent seed doctrine, the gap theory, also known as gapped creationism. Um, Dennis Murray has taught what's called pseudo archaeological Anglo Israelism. He discusses this through multiple translations using um, the King James Version Bible, a Strong's Concordance, and he gets the translations through the Greek, Aramaic, and Hebrew texts. The ancient ones is what he studies from. Um, let's see here. So at the beginning of the ritual, Dennis Murray came in, stood by the podium. Many of the church gatherers were speaking for a little bit, and then they sat down, and then he told the gatherers to open their Bibles to Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. And he began reading from Genesis, and he explained and read each verse um, and how it pertained to the serpent seed point of view. And he also discussed the gap theory. He talked with his congregation and they shared in laughter. And then the one thing I did note during the viewing is the church service compared to others is they don't sing psalms in between their speaking from verses and such. They don't stop and do songs and things like that. Pastor Dennis Murray spends the entire service teaching chapter by chapter and verse by verse, explaining what each verse means and even the different terms in all the ancient languages. So, like, he would take a word from one of the verses, like an important one, and he would tell them what the difference is between what the word is for Aramaic, the Greek word, and the Hebrew word, and then he would find it in the Strong's Concordance and explain what it means because each translation actually means something different, and so on. So, what is the serpent seed doctrine? He basically he took the Genesis, like the beginning, how the earth was created, how the animals, typical Christian views on the beginning of the world and the creation, and discussed what's called the Kenite lineage. The Kenites are also known as the line of Cain. During the great sin in the Garden of Eden, Eve conceived fraternal twins. So the serpent seed doctrine talks about um, many teach, many teach in many different ways that Eve ate an apple and shared it with Adam, and they ate of the tree of knowledge from good and knowing good and evil now. And but she didn't eat an apple, according to what he is talking about, the great sin in the um is was adultery and fornication. It wasn't an apple. It's just a metaphor for not basically cheating on your husband, or and so on and so forth. And basically Eve cheated on Adam with Satan, Lucifer, and then Adam partook with them. So in that process, Eve conceived what he talks about as fraternal twins: Cain, the son of Satan, and Abel, the son of Adam. Um, and then so on and so forth. And then after that, he also talked about atomism and the gap theory. So, the gap theory, also known as gap creationism or atomism, is they go hand in hand according to what he is discussing. The gap theory states that there are three earth ages. The first earth age was the time period prior to Genesis 1 2. During that time, God created every single soul ever to exist, 12 billion to be exact. And during this time, every human soul, all animals, and dinosaurs lived together on earth. It was also during this time that the rebellion in heaven happened, where Satan fell and a third of the angels fell with him to earth. And during this time, all humans were actually in spiritual bodies, they weren't in flesh bodies. So, in order to ruin God's greatest creation, the fallen angels began mating with females, of human females, creating Nephilim. And God couldn't allow this to go on, so he had to start over. So this would be considered the first dispensation. So he wiped everything out with an asteroid, destroying everything. He sent the fallen angels to Tartarus to await the great white throne judgment. And he basically started his creation over. And that's where it comes into Genesis. So we'll get into that. What is atomism? So Pastor Dennis Murray then explained atomism, which suggests that during the first earth age, those who served God are predestined to salvation, known as God's elect. And then those who worship Satan during the first earth age are cursed with the flesh bodies in the second earth age, which is where we are now, with free will, and have the opportunity to choose either Satan or God in the second earth age. Where is this found in the scripture? So basically, the Bible, the King James Version, is a translation from the ancient Greek, Aramaic, and Hebrew texts, but the translation isn't perfect. So, in order to get the proper translations, Pastor Murray not only delves into the ancient Greek, Aramaic, and Hebrew texts, but he goes to the Strong's Concordance, and those in the church, I noticed, also have Strong's Concordances. So when he explains a word or a translation in those ancient texts, they can go to it in the Strong's Concordance so that they can see the true meaning of it, because this was the King James Version was the first Bible to be translated from those to English, but it's not perfect. So that's why he uses the ancient scripture, because that way you get to the bottom of the real translations and there's no confusion. So, what does gap creationism have to do with Genesis? So this is discussed that each day of creation was 1,000 years. So there were 7 days total of creation. And so in that time, it took 1,000 years per day to recreate the earth, because you got to think, God destroyed everything, dinosaurs, anything that was living on earth, with a meteor impact, and it completely destroyed the world. So it took God 7,000 years to recreate the earth. So 1,000 years per day of Genesis days. And also, in order to prevent Nephilim from being created again by any other angels that may have rebelled following, God had to create man and woman into flesh bodies. And so, due to that, they were no longer in heavenly bodies. So, they had to be born and die through flesh bodies in order to receive their heavenly bodies and re enter heaven. So, what is the purpose of the serpent seed doctrine? It discusses why Satan caused Adam and Eve to sin in the Garden of Eden. It was in order to stop the birth of Jesus Christ. That's why Satan rebelled. His job as a cherubim, according to what Reverend Murray was talking about, was to protect the mercy seat. But his pride made him want to sit on the mercy seat, and that's what made him fall. He rebelled against what God wanted him to do. It was his job. So the point of Adam and Eve was to bring forth the line of Jesus Christ. So in Genesis 1:26 through 31, King James Version, on the fifth day, God made all humans, all man and women who were meant to exist then. So that was prior to the eighth day creation of Adam. So he also explained that using the Aramaic texts, that Adam and Eve weren't created in order to create the world. They were created because they were the line, the pure line that was going to lead to Mary. It was their bloodline that would lead to Mary, and she's the one who birthed Jesus. So it was their lineage that led to her to bring Christ into the world. So Adam and Eve were created in the Garden of Eden because and the reason they were separated from the rest of the humans is because they were immortal at the time. So them being immortal and being the pure line, they were separated. And then the other humans that were created, mind you, on the fifth day, it'd been 5, 6, close to 3,000 years of the original creation of humans up until Adam and Eve were created. If you're looking at it from a 1,000-year perspective each, the fifth day would be 1,000 years, and then 6, 7, 8. So yeah, I mean that's a lot of time in between for many humans to populate. So, anyways, they were the pure Hebrew bloodline that would lead down to Mary, who bore Jesus Christ. When Satan tainted the line with Cain, Cain grew up with Abel, and if you're familiar with the story, Cain became the first murderer and slew Abel, and then that was intended to stop the line, and then Cain went on to produce children and their children's children and so on, and then that became the line of Cain. They're also called Kenites, which still exists to this day. But Adam and Eve, it didn't end there. So Adam and Eve bore Seth, which was their third son. And Seth's line, actually, when you read Genesis and you go on through that, his line goes all the way down through the Tower of Babel, and his line actually continues to Noah. And then Noah is a part of that line. That's why they were chosen. Then it goes through to Lot, and so on and so forth. It goes all the way down until Mary. Mary was the final in that line, and then Christ was conceived immaculately, just placed there by God so that he could come into the world without being mixed with man's seed, which would have tainted him. So that was the purpose of Adam and Eve, according to Reverend Murray, or Pastor Murray. So at the end of the service, it was about a 2-hour service, so I did sit through quite a bit of it, and I was pretty intrigued because I've never heard of any of that. So it's very interesting how they you know really they go back to the ancient texts and break it down and so on and so forth. It's very fascinating when you hear it from that side, because you don't hear that a lot at other churches. I've been to Christian churches, and they're each teaches differently. But at the end of the service, Pastor Murray thanked everybody for coming, and then the people all conversed together and then they started to leave, and so on and so forth. But then Pastor Murray went to another room, and the camera changed from inside the church to his office. And actually, he began reading questions on camera for those at home viewers, such as myself and so on, who had maybe sent in questions or and so on, or in so on and so forth. So he answered their questions with scripture, and also they sent in prayer requests, um, which he doesn't read online. That's one thing that he doesn't do that I've noted, compared to other services. They actually show, he doesn't read them. Basically, he blesses them in the name of God, and he moves on, like, because it's between them and God, not the rest of the people viewing, which I find very respectful. And then he answers questions that people ask with scripture and where to find the answers in the Bible. He gives them books and verses. And it made me really want to become part of the congregation, because he made everyone feel so welcome, and he explained things so great. But then following that, he thanked everybody for coming, gave them info on where they can send their letters and prayer requests, and then the live stream ended. So it was a very fascinating service. So my references were the live stream that they have up all the time on Shepherd's Chapel official on YouTube. It's really the only place you can find the live stream, other than on TV. They stream like 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can give them on shortwave and so on and so forth. But to actually view it, what I needed, I had to do it through the YouTube channel. Um, a lot of the info about Pastor Murray, his bibliography, was on the BioGriffins site, and then more about them in the church was on their official Shepherd's Chapel website. So, but that was my ritual observation research project, and I hope you find it about as fascinating as I did, because it was very interesting to hear that different points of view. So thanks, guys, and let me know what you think.